It's a hot, humid summer night here in Wisconsin. Let's talk about depression. Hey, thanks for joining me for another That's Not My God. I took the week off last week because I was dealing with some illness. I was the last one in my family to get hit with this cold that was going around. But I want to talk about depression because it's something that affects a lot of people. I worked under a pastor many, many years ago, talking a decade or two ago, and he would make the congregation say this: I'm too blessed to be depressed. You know, I've never been one of those pastors that say, turn to your neighbor and say, or make the congregation repeat after me, especially a phrase like that, that is so hurting to a person that is a Christian and battling depression. It's not okay. Depression is something that's very real, and quite honestly, you're not any less of a Christian if you are depressed. All throughout Scripture, people dealt with depression. This last Sunday, I talked about 1 Kings 18, 1 Kings 19, where Elijah just had this "whose God is bigger" moment with the prophets of Baal, and God showed up and did some awesome things. 450 false prophets dead. Just an amazing time of ministry for Elijah. Kind of horrifying too. I mean, that many people dead. But Elijah has this huge moment, and then the very next chapter, he's depressed and said, God, kill me, because Jezebel's after him. And, you know, it just takes a few people in ministry to make a person depressed. We look at that story and we say, my goodness, there's a lot of Christians today would say, you're that dealing with depression? How are you in the Lord? How are you in Jesus? What's going on? Are you even saved? People that are ill-advised as to what life is really all about and what Scripture has to say. We look at a story of Noah, the only person God could find faithful. On, builds the ark, saves the world. We know the story. How does the story end? Noah's naked, drunk, on a beach. Sounds perfectly logical to me, actually. A lot of times that people experience depression is after a big time of ministry output. But that's for another podcast. You see, we look at those stories and we say, my goodness, what's going on? What do we do? The worst thing a person that's depressed could do is withdraw. We need to serve. We need to continue serving. We need to be around people. And we need to be able to have people around us that we can share, quite honestly, what we're dealing with. Sunday, I talked about this very topic at the church I serve at. And, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, we adopted a biological brother and sister because we couldn't have our own. And I won't go into details as to why we couldn't. But we adopted, and it was great. It's beautiful. We're still in touch with the mom. Just a phenomenal kids. We love them to death. But I tell you what, it was years that we couldn't have kids, and now these two showed up in our life. The first one, on 2 weeks' notice with a bunch of totes, came to our house, showed up at our house at 9 months old. What do we do with this? I called the social worker and I said, Kimberly, I think I'm cracking up because I have never been in such a depression before. She told me, you know, the fact is this, that postpartum depression just doesn't affect ones with biological children, but with adoption as well. Probably more so with people that adopt because of the high cost that comes with it. And so she goes, what I'm willing to bet is that you're mourning the loss of your freedom. Yahtzee. That's what it was. I was dealing with life has changed. And I love the kids. I didn't love them any less, but I was in a depression. This is what I was dealing with. Now, fast forward 8 years, God has blessed us with a miracle baby, our own biological one. I love him to death, the joy of my life. But I'm finding myself in that same slump again. I've shared it with my wife. I've shared it with my mother-in-law. And I've shared it with some counselors that I know, and they said, you know, the number one thing that you have on this is that you know what's causing it. And as Christians, we shouldn't poo-poo the idea of depression or people that are dealing with it. I've been hit with a lot of things in the last year and a half. In March of 2015, I found out I have MS. A couple of months later, I found out we're pregnant. I'm 42 and I'm starting over again. Cue up Father Abraham. You know, Father Abraham had many sons. But the fact is that I'm excited, but I'm working through some things right now. And this is what we need to do as Christians. I told the church on Sunday, and I tell them this often. When somebody comes to me and says, I'm dealing with depression, Or I have a lot of guys that come to me and say, I'm dealing with pornography. I look at them and I say, you are a very mature Christian. You're probably more mature than a lot of the Christians that are out there because you're willing to admit it and you're willing to deal with it. Now, what can we do to get over this thing? Because quite honestly, depression, I want to get out of it, and I'm working on it, and I have made some great strides, but it takes a while. It's not going to be one of those altar call moment nights. It could, but I don't know. But you're no less of a Christian if you're admitting a problem and dealing with it. In fact, Paul says, I boast of my weaknesses so that the grace of God can be glorified in my life. So if you're going through depression, keep going, but don't withdraw. Keep serving, keep loving the Lord, and surround yourself with people. Because in your deepest, darkest times is where you find Jesus. And he reintroduces you to yourself. And you'll grow from it. Shoot me a message if you'd like. Here's my email address. I'd love to pray for you, stay in touch with you, whatever it takes. Have a good night.